Now this is an odd, maybe I'm veering
A
off to a side,
hermetic detour.
but I think it has every. Perhaps we can feel the connections. I was watching some DVD about. I've been very moved with the colony collapse of the bees and this and that.
Oh, yes.
And there was a beautiful Rudolf Steiner orientation. A group of sort of produced this DVD on the beekeepers, anthroposophical beekeepers, and we're talking about their connection to the bees and the plight of the bees. And at one point in this documentary, they show the queen bee being sort of held in a vice-like structure, her nether orifice being pulled apart by two things that kind of open it, and then the fertilization sort of being imposed upon her in this sort of brightly lit mechanical manner.
Good heavens.
Wow. This is nature doing this?
No, it's no.
Or this is the beekeepers?
Yeah, no, it's not the anthroposophical beekeepers. They're saying modern science, modern approaches to beekeeping are doing this to reproduce bees. And
because they're losing the bee
Because
population.
of the loss of the bee population.
and I probably even without the loss of the bee, this is the way to reproduce bees. We have more.
Do it better. Do
We
it
have more
faster.
productivity.
Let's force
of bees.
them. Let's
Right.
force them to do
Let's
it.
do it this way, which
Increase productivity.
is the same thing as IVF.
In vitro fertilization.
And so there is a time and place, of course, for this. But perhaps people move too quickly to it. They want to force, just like we're saying, they want to force a resolution of a schism. It feels to me sometimes, when I just have that image of the queen bee, it's very aggressive.
Yeah, the rape of nature, literally.
Yeah.
Whereas you think, the idea of conception, conceiving an idea, just conception, is to I'm going to veer off again, but John Weir Perry, who wrote all about schizophrenia and all of that, talks about, in his time, he formed a group of a place in San Francisco called Diabolus or something, and something like that. But anyway, it was a place where his ideas, the psyche, causes a psychotic break because the ego is too rigid and doesn't work. And so it is dissolving the ego completely. All the libido is descending into the depths where the archetypal images lurk to reconstitute and recreate a new ego. So his place, the people weren't polarized, one up, one down. The staff had a mythological sensitivity. The person who had the break would come in there, not receive any medication, and paint and draw and hear the great myths, because they're producing myths themselves, as you know. Yeah, the sun came down. There was this one guy who I worked with who was psychotic, and he dreamt that the moon came out. He goes, the moon came down and sucked out my head. And I said, lunatic. Lunatic. That's what it is. He just gave me the image of what it is. That's what happens. So he said, create the space where that process can happen. You give them the images that can help them orient themselves, because the myths are organized, right? They're like a large transformer, so the energy can travel through it and reconstitute a new image. Whereas he goes, and then it didn't last. It was in the 70s, and then the funding went away, and then now you have, the person has a psychotic break, they jump in with the pharmaceuticals very quickly. There's a time and place for them. But when it's the knee-jerk and no cultivation of anything, the ego was falling apart. You give them medication, you abort that process. They don't, you got to get them out of the psychiatric hospital, which used to be the asylum where you had containment for as long as you need to go into those depths and allow to fall apart completely.
Yeah.
You're contained there. But
Your
now,
cocoon.
but now you've got the HMOs or Department of Mental Health or what. 3 days.
Stop.
Yeah,
Just
that's
stop.
enough.
No more growth for you.
Stabilize them, give them daily living skills, and send them on the way. But that's aborting the process. So you've patched up the ego that wasn't working in the first place.
Right.
And this father had a dream where he was working with a barbecue grill. He had the propane tank underneath, and as he was trying to cook, there was a problem with the propane tank, and suddenly the thing caught fire, and it caught the whole thing on fire. All of this heated up. He was by the beach on concrete. This thing got so hot the concrete melted, and the whole piece of equipment went down. And then out in the ocean, a huge explosion happened. And I thought, here is an image that if you don't take up, because he had an anger problem, if you don't take up your anger, if you don't lean into your shadow, your unaware side, you don't cook this stuff properly, then you explode, you hurt your wife, your children suffer. But by having not carried those opposites and done that inner work, you are contributing underneath and out of sight to that collective explosion that will happen. So when we go, it's not necessarily joining Greenpeace or going off and joining some movement.
Perhaps only
If one can deeply hold those opposites and have the courage to peer into your depths and encounter the other within and start to hold these opposites with welcome grandmother, then perhaps you are preventing, at least perhaps, your contribution in a negative manner to that explosion. Perhaps by you doing it, one person galvanized in that manner can quietly affect an enormous change, because they're able to, they accomplished it, which Jesus is probably the most prominent example, holding the cross and being able to
Holding the opposites.
That's right.
It seems like it is very difficult for most people to even perceive of holding the opposites. Most people just cling to one, and that's their comfort. That's their source of comfort. So to even touch the other one is scary, and they feel disloyal to their collective. To their collective.
And sometimes I imagine that it appears to be as difficult as being crucified. Because the ego is so attached to being right, to having the right answer, the right way, the powerful side. To give that up can feel like a crucifixion, because if your entire identity is riding on that way being the right way, how could you possibly go that far outside your comfort zone to entertain the possibility that the opposing, quote unquote, viewpoint has something to offer you? By the way, I recommend the prosciutto with the melon.
Oh, the melon, of course.
That turns out to be a delicious combination. In fact, maybe I should also put some of the honeydew melon on this plate.
Honeydew would be
even better, I
lovely.
think.
And what do you think?
She recommended the prosciutto
With melon.
Ah, yes. Yes,
Getting the honeydew, which is better. Cantaloupe is maybe we let it ripen a little too long. The honeydew is perfect.
Yeah.
It's exactly the most ripe it can be without being...
So